Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot here with Elliot Kaufman and Kim Strassel. And Elliot, I just want to get a little sense from you. I know you talked to Israeli sources. What is the reaction inside Israel to the U.S. threat of a full-scale arms embargo and the news that they're withholding some of the heavy weapons initially? And now the implication with some statements from the U.S. that, in fact, the U.S. has been withholding intelligence from Israel about the location of some of the leading terrorists of Hamas in Gaza, because the story is that they've told Israel, we'll provide you with the intel if you don't go into Rafah, which suggests that they've been withholding it.
Yeah, the feeling is one of betrayal, a sense that we thought we had the same goal here, destroying Hamas, and maybe we don't. And having to face up to that on this question of a report about U.S. having key intel on where Hamas's terrorist leader is hiding it and offering to hand it over as part of a deal. The sense is, you had this information and you didn't hand it over right away? What could possibly be the justification for that?
It would help the war get over earlier.
Certainly. With Sinwar out of the way, all sorts of deals would open up for both sides, I believe. So Israelis are having to face this. And of course, a lot of voices saying, well, in Israel, we had better make our own weapons as much as we can, as fast as we can. That's certainly a message that has gotten through. And the sense is, America has helped Israel tremendously in this war, but has also held it back. And does there come a point at which the help is not worth the holdback? Israelis are asking that very difficult question.
I saw Twitter comments from Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, which was critical of the U.S. arms embargo, saying it was counterproductive, sent the wrong message to Middle Eastern adversaries of the U.S. and Israel. On the other hand, critical of the Israeli government. He's now an opponent, not in the government, but he was critical of the Israeli government, saying that it needs a plan for post-war Gaza, and he doesn't see it. They haven't really moved there. Kim, is that a vulnerability here for the government of Israel, that there doesn't seem to be a post-war plan for Gaza?
Well, I think we have to give Israel a little bit of a break here, in that it's actually just trying to finish its main objective at the moment, which is to stop a terrorist group that has continued to slaughter its people. We saw in that clip that you ran, Blinken being critical of Israel for not doing that. I thought, by the way, that was an unnecessary interjection. I think it's very difficult to have a plan for reconstruction and a vision for what this area looks like post-war without knowing what the outcome of this is. And, I was struck by that Blinken comment, too, because he said, well, we want to envision a future in which Hamas has no role in governing. Even as he said, as you and Elliot were discussing, he said, you can't defeat Hamas. So how does that exactly work? And I think all of these ideas, sure, people should be thinking about an end game. But until this immediate objective is secured, until we know what this is going to look like afterward, it's very, very difficult to proceed with those plans.
Probably don't want to get too much into the details of this, because this is a really after the war question, but I think there'll be a role for Arab governments to help Palestinians set themselves up. I want to ask you, Elliot, here just about this UN vote last week. The General Assembly took a vote not giving Palestine formal state status, but pretty close to it. I mean, it's going to have the ability to have its representatives on committees, representatives in different parts of the goings-on at the General Assembly. The U.S. opposed that vote, but it passed overwhelmingly. And one reason the U.S. opposed it is because this idea of establishing kind of not quite a de facto state, but a state in anything but formal name, violates the Oslo Accord that went back to the Clinton administration, where the plan for an actual state of a two-state solution, if you will, for one state for the Palestinians had to be direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. In this case, it's just declared by the UN.
Right. And the idea was negotiations, because each side would have to give up something, as opposed to a unilateral declaration where you don't give up anything. And so does this push peace closer? I don't see it that way. I mean, you have a Palestinian Authority leadership that has really no support from the people. All it has are these international statements that it puts out. It can barely govern the West Bank. The idea that it's going to be given Gaza and be able to hold down Gaza seems a little far-fetched at the moment. And so it's making grand statements at the UN. The U.S. position has always been to oppose these sorts of things. It seems the U.S. isn't opposing it very strongly at the moment. And U.S. law has held that should a UN body grant the Palestinians member state status or something with the same standing as that, then the U.S. would have to defund that body, the UN in this case. So they tried to steer clear of that with the privileges that were granted, but the UN General Assembly came pretty close this time. And so they're walking a fine line there, keeping U.S. support while clearly running afoul of this longstanding U.S. stance.
Kim, just quickly on this arms embargo question, Biden's threat, do you think that politically here in the United States that is sustainable, or is he going to have to bend?
I think he's going to have to bend. And I think that the notion that the administration understands that it might have to bend is present, for instance, in that report that was sent to Congress, which wasn't definitive about, for instance, the claim that it had violated international law, because it's been very careful in all of its statements and what it's doing to give itself an out. For instance, it's noted, well, no final decision has been made on these, if they're going to go out. This report kind of walked around this question about whether or not there was a violation. They understand that while they're engaged in some signaling, they were also throwing this out there, a little bit of a trial balloon to see how it's set. You now have this growing opposition in Congress. I would wager you're going to begin to see some opinion polling that suggests broader public disapproval. And I think this might be something, they might be very cagey in how they do it in the end and sort of say, well, Israel ended up fulfilling these commitments and gave us these assurances, et cetera, and try to pretend they got something out of this. But I think they may end up having to send it anyway.
All right. Thank you, Kim Strassel. Thank you, Elliot Kaufman. Thank you all for listening. We're here every day on Potomac Watch and look forward to having you with us tomorrow. Thanks for listening.